Way back again with another quick Super Mono progress video, simply because I'm getting kind of lazy and this is way easier than typing. Last time we put something online, still waiting on swing arm bearings. Obviously those are in, been pressed into place, brand new Koso bearings, so the swing arm is in the frame and the engine is all bolted up the way it should. Again, we've got some spacers in here getting everything lined up perfect, and of course, being anal retentive, I rechecked this sprocket alignment and it's bang on, so that's a good thing. Got the oil tank in place and properly plumbed. This is stock hoses from an SZR 660, but I came up with my own hose solution here with some nice AN fittings at both ends and some custom braided black hose here. So I kind of like the looks of that, and it's not that the stock stuff was particularly bad, but you know, this is aircraft quality stuff and it should be more than up for the job. In the process of fitting some control cables, like a lot of these conversions, you know, this is a clutch cable from a TT600 and it's about, I don't know, 6 feet too long for the lower bars. So I've got a Van Hill cable kit and I just need to check some fittings and that sort of thing. I may adapt another clutch cable because of the nature of the clutch lever here. I need a nice 90-degree bend basically right as it comes out of the lever perch here, and rather than, you know, a sharp bend like this, which is going to cause some binding. I might have to adapt something else. Likewise at this end in the for the throttle, these are the EX 250 carbs, and again a sharp bend here to clear this cross frame tube here. So I found some bent ferrule from, again, another throttle cable that I had lying around, and then again some Van Hill internal cable here that all fit to work with the throttle I have here properly. So we'll have to work on that in the next little while. Waiting on borrowing some race takeoffs for some fellow racers. So these tires are going to be switched out pretty soon. I think this rear one here has a huge crack in it. Yeah, I don't know how well you can see it, but obviously cold damaged. They'd been in storage for a while, but protected the rim when it was getting shipped. A couple other interesting things that came up. I'm still waiting on some hardware to properly mount the rear subframe, so that hasn't been fully attached yet. Of course, the good old Climber manual. When I went to take the rear shock off, I noticed that on this end, the stock Yamaha has needle bearings in the linkage, but this had a solid bushing pressed in with no opportunity for it to pivot. So what I ended up having to do is press out the bushing that was there and find some sort of needle bearing or some sort of a fitting that would allow the shock to rotate as the swing arm went up and down through its travel. So I ended up butchering a Ducati shock that I had lying around and using some of what looked to me, and I may be using North American terminology here, but like the rotating Zerk fitting ends that you see on rose joints. Anyway, whatever. I was able to press 2 of them actually into here and fabricate a couple of top hat bushings and checked it, and it's basically the right width, and now this will pivot at both ends like a cantilever shock has to as it goes up and down through its travel. Just the last thing that I wanted to point out, or the second last thing, is I've got the rear thumb brake cable in place. I'll secure this at various places as it goes up through its travel. I think I can pick up on this piece here too and keep the rear brake cable out of the way and not close to any hot engine components. This is not too close, but probably within an inch of the exhaust pipe, so I want to keep an eye on that, both the brake cable, and this is the automatic decompression cable here that's attached to the cylinder head. So I want to make sure that those stay away from that hot exhaust. I might end up even wrapping this with some thermal exhaust wrap just in case. So one issue that I've noticed here is that as the Kickstarter goes through its travel, it doesn't actually foul on the peg, but it comes quite close. So I could see yourself, if you weren't paying attention, kind of like twatting the inside of your right ankle as you press through, because as this comes down, and I can't really turn it over by hand, it does turn over, but there's some compression there. This piece here aligns basically with the end of this nice sharp edged foot peg. So the solution to that, though, is, as I said on an earlier video, this peg here is way too high. I goofed on my measurements, so basically this peg has to go down right about there, which may provide a bit more clearance as it'll be further away from this Kickstarter itself. And I guess the last thing that I'm happy to report is the wiring obviously is by no means complete, but using my handy dandy climber manual, I realized the one thing that hadn't been hooked up yet is this black with a white stripe wiring, which is actually the ECU cutout switch. And on these bikes, it's not a rocker switch, it's a constant on and then press down to shut off thing. You kind of ground out the engine, and that's what shuts off the ECU. So basically, it's hot right now. So I pulled out the plug and kicked the engine over, and I got a nice fat spark. So I'm pretty happy about that. And I had to rework on some of this wiring here. There was some splits and cuts, and I had to, you know, solder some things back together. So it's nice to know that, at least in terms of a spark, I've got a spark, and hopefully with everything lined up, that it's sparking at the right time. I keep saying I've got one more thing, and I find other things to talk about. This I'm kind of happy with too. I just stumbled across a Vortex upper triple clamp from an R6, and of course this is now a 16-17-year-old bike, so they're less and less popular, but someone had one of those on eBay. I trimmed off the key ignition tumbler holder here, so it kind of has a nice racy look, and I hope to put the 2-inch tachometer right there, which should be able to work off the 12-volt charge, accessory charge that comes off of this yellow wire here, which would normally run a headlight and a tail light for the street bike. And I hope to mount it. You can kind of see a couple M6 mounting holes there, and just kind of come up with a bracket that goes right there. I guess that's it for now. Unfortunately, with the routing of the cables and that sort of thing here in the front, my original number plate mount solution wasn't going to work, so I got to come up with another way to mount that number plate, or I might even think of getting more of a cafe style of fairing to provide a little bit of wind protection. There's a couple that I'm looking at, but that's getting into the almost cosmetic / aesthetic piece that can wait until I make sure I have this bloody thing running in the first place. But certainly all indications point that it will run, because I've got a spark. I guess one last thing, the last thing I want to show off, if I can remember where I put it. Oh, over here. You see, impeccably clean garage, is my super cheap carbon fiber fairing. Someone had listed it on eBay. It looked like it had been damaged by brake fluid, and so there was some cosmetic flaws in the original clear coat, so I bought it for cheap, wet sanded it, dry sanded it, got it smooth. It looked pretty nasty looking, but I knew from past experience that the dull finish, as long as it's been keyed up and it's consistent, you shoot it with clear, and it actually looks pretty good. So again, doesn't maybe come out great with the camera. Orange peel as always, because I'm not a pro, but it certainly looks 100% better than when I got it. And like all things carbon fiber, it's as light as a feather. So kind of happy about that. So waiting on some seat hardware, and start making up some more rear set templates, and yeah, silly things like 5/16 fuel hose. Not easily available, 1/4 inches everywhere, but not the larger stuff, and I'll keep plugging away at it. But knock wood, we should have it running in the not too distant future. Check back when you can.